One of the interesting things about the current political climate is just how differently the exact same event or the exact same statement can be interpreted through different ideological lenses, and even more weirdly, how these drastically different interpretations can actually agree in hating something, but for wildly different reasons. A great example of what I'm talking about happened over the weekend. Bernie Sanders spoke at the Second Step Presidential Justice Forum on Saturday. It was a policing and criminal justice event at Benedict College, a historically black college in South Carolina. A student attendee asked Bernie what advice he'd give him for a police interaction if he was Bernie's son.
If I'm your son, what advice would you give me the next time I be pulled over by a police officer?
I would do my best to identify who that police officer is in a polite way, ask him or her for their name. I would respect what they are doing so that you don't get shot in the back of the head. But I would also be very mindful of the fact that as a nation, we have got to hold police officers accountable for the actions that they commit.
When I first heard this clip, I thought, yeah, what a bunch of nonsense. I can see why this is generating controversy. The implication that the police are some kind of minority execution squad, putting barrels to brains like this is Boondock Saints or something. Are there police shootings? Yes. Are there unjustified police shootings? Yes. Are there cold-blooded police executions to the back of the head? Show me one. I'll wait. And we'll see who dies first. Me decaying into a skeleton in this chair, or literally anyone in the way Bernie just described. And even showing me such a case would still be insufficient because that's only half of Bernie's claim. The other half is that after these executions, police aren't being held sufficiently accountable. Who are these executioner cops evading justice? Cases as clear-cut as Bernie is describing don't often leave these killer cops free. Amber Geiger, the Dallas cop who shot the guy in his own apartment, she's in prison. Michael Slager, the South Carolina cop who shot Walter Scott in the back while he was running away, he's in prison. Jason Van Dyke, the cop who shot Laquan McDonald in Chicago, he's in prison. And the list goes on. I know these are anecdotal, but so is the claim. Where are these executioner cops not being held accountable? Show me some examples. And all of this is even richer coming from a guy who suddenly has some oddly out-of-character skepticism about state power. If state agents pull you over, assume they're malice, because let's be honest, they probably want to kill you. But if they're running your healthcare, your education, your housing, every other aspect of your life, go ahead and trust them without question. They're obviously looking out for you. To be fair, I don't actually hate the general advice Bernie is giving. If the police confront you, remain calm, follow instructions, yes sir, no sir, thank you sir. If you do that, your likelihood of dying is effectively zero. And if the police mistreat you, there are avenues through which you can challenge and appeal that later. I just hate the premises he's using, that the police are some murder mafia out to feed you to the fishes. No, overwhelmingly, they're out to help you. They don't threaten you if you don't threaten them. I agree with Bernie that we should respect the police, but because respect earns respect, not because respect is the only way to appease a would-be murderer. In thinking through my disagreement, though, I didn't realize that Bernie's commentary is actually controversial on progressive Twitter for the exact opposite reason. Not because it unfairly maligns police, but because it's too lenient on them. CNN's headline news even gave it a brief mention.
I would respect what they are doing so that you don't get shot in the back of the head.
That was during a Q&A session at a historically black college and university. Now, Sanders caught heat on Twitter about it, with people saying that he doesn't understand race relations. He tweeted a clip of the Q&A and hasn't responded post-backlash.
Root writer Michael Harriot tweets that Philando Castile would beg to differ, that treating cops respectfully will keep you alive. Yeah, maybe he would, and maybe incredibly so. It is tough to defend the cop in that case. The whole thing happened because the cop panicked during a miscommunication about a gun, thinking Philando Castile was reaching for one. The footage does show a respectful Castile, who unfortunately lost his life anyway. But is the Castile case the rule or the exception? Arguing that one outlier proves respecting police still gets you killed anyway is like arguing this woman almost getting cut in half by her seatbelt means we should just ditch them and fly freely through our windshields instead. One bad outcome doesn't negate advice that's good in 99% of cases, and beyond that, it's tough to argue that the Castile case was a purely racial incident. The cop who shot Castile was Latino, acquitted on a manslaughter charge in part by 2 black jurors. And I'm sure this is where we get into internalized racism or whatever. Fine. But this clearly was not a case of a helpless minority begging for his life before a bloodthirsty white man under the protection of the white supremacist justice system. Pastor, author, and talk show host Talbert Swan asks Bernie, is that why black people get shot? They're not respecting police? Come on, man. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Think of the high-profile cases. Michael Brown certainly wasn't respecting police when he reached for Darren Wilson's gun and started punching him. By the way, take the Obama Justice Department's word for it, not mine. Stephon Clark certainly wasn't respecting police when he was breaking into cars and evading cops throughout the neighborhood, ignoring repeated instructions to surrender. Alton Sterling certainly was not respecting police when he resisted arrest and reached for his revolver after police attempted several non-lethal methods to subdue him. In all of these cases and many more, following Bernie's advice would have saved lives. I don't see how that's even debatable, especially considering that none of these cops were ever convicted on any type of homicide charge, let alone racially motivated homicide. These guys would not have died but for their own aggression. Oh, but that's because everyone's racist, you see. From Baton Rouge to St. Louis to Sacramento, it's all racists as far as the eye can see. This according to the top response to that Bernie video posted on Twitter. That's why cops are still regularly murdering black people. They're racist, even though we don't have any citable examples. And besides, this is ignorant advice from Bernie, because black people already teach this to their kids. Yeah, that's what I say anytime some jackass tells me to have a good day or drive safe or get a good night's rest. You ignorant piece of crap. I was already taught that. Police work for the people. By default, they should respect the people, not the other way around. Of course, but it's not either or, it's both. Advising you to respect and cooperate with police officers is not advising police officers to mistreat you or excusing it if they do. Police work at our pleasure to protect and to serve, to uphold our Constitution, to enforce our laws. That's true. But that doesn't mean they can't or don't face threats themselves and must act to defend themselves accordingly. In fact, their job requires it in many cities every single day. It doesn't mean they don't deserve the same basic respect we'd offer to anyone else we expect to serve us. I wouldn't go to a restaurant and mistreat the waitstaff to get a good dinner since, after all, they're working for me. If this duct tape operation ever grows and I can hire employees, I wouldn't mistreat them to get them to work hard for me since, after all, they're working for me. If I'm at the hospital having emergency surgery, I wouldn't mistreat the surgeon to get him to save my life, since after all, he's working for me. In no other context of someone else working for us would we treat that person like crap and still expect and demand exemplary service in return solely on account of our own sense of entitlement. Yet we are developing a culture that does this with police all the time. I get to malign you while I hoard the benefit of every doubt and the assumption of good intentions all to myself. That is a recipe for conflict in any relationship. In many contexts, we call that abuse. And the truth is, 99+% of police who encounter this sort of unjustified hostility do handle it with the exact sort of professionalism and compassion these woke scolds demand. They do get treated like crap and still serve honorably despite it. It's just a non-story when they do. This police bloodlust narrative is a fantasy, but ironically, the only way it gets anything close to true is if we follow these woke scold calls to malign, to distrust, to generalize a broad group of people as cold-blooded killers. I don't know when we'll get to these execution squads, but kindness is not going to be the result. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.